we're into, if I go to the purchase order system, landed cost is managed down here. See where it says landed cost type maintenance rate? Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, we're good.
So purchase order options is where I would have to go through first and turn on landed cost. I guess it's under entry. Anybody know where landed cost lives?
No.
Hold on a second. Oh, there it is. Allow entry of landed cost. Okay, so it's on the line entry tab of purchase order options. So allow entry of landed cost. This needs to be turned on in order for any of this to work as we start talking. Okay, so if any of you want to play with this as an idea and a concept and try to see how it would work for you and what the effects of it are and how it gets set up and all that kind of stuff, where it, how it gets applied. Everybody should have test data set up in some kind of a test company. If you don't, then somebody from LLB can certainly help you get that set up. We make a test copy company of your current data. We turn on landed costs there, and we play with it as a feature against purchase orders you might have currently outstanding. Okay, so we could turn that on, but this needs to be turned on. This allow entry of landed cost under the line entry tab. And when that's turned on, it gives you the ability to manage the landed cost types that you might choose to use under here. So if I go to landed cost type maintenance, the way that this works, you can set up, you can set up any number of landed cost types that represent costs associated with deliveries of product to your door. Whether you're going to use them in production, whether you're going to buy, resell them, whatever it might be. If you want to show cost in inventory as the cost you pay the vendor plus additional costs that are associated with the delivery of that product to your door, then this is where landed cost comes into play. Okay, and landed cost then, and again, this is a conversation you should, if you don't have this currently set up in your system, this is a conversation you should certainly have with your accountant to talk to them about the effects of changing really the valuation of your inventory. What this is going to do is it's going to increase the valuation of your inventory as you turn this on and start to use it, because now an item that used to cost you $1 and has a 30% tariff on it is going to show as being worth $1.30 to you, and it's going to have an impact on profitability and pricing and all of those things. But it does perhaps give you a more accurate picture of how your inventory, how much your inventory is actually worth to you. So it's something to consider. What you do when you're setting up landed cost types is you give it a cost type code of some kind. You can give it a description here. And then there's an allocation method. So the allocation method can either be by weight, by cost, by quantity, by volume. And what that means is it looks at the total, let's say it's by cost as it is here in freight and as we have it set up in tariffs. If you look at it looks at the total cost for all of the items on the purchase order and then distributes whatever you've said is the total amount of, in this case, freight across all of those items based on their relative costs. Okay, same thing by weight. If you have item weights in your inventory file for the items that you're purchasing, it looks at the weights that are, for each of the items. It extends all the weights out and then says it goes through and divides that as a percentage of weight. So if one item, if you're doing a freight charge and one item, weighs 100 pounds and one item weighs 10 pounds, and it's going to distribute the cost of freight and the value of that, or the amount of that freight based on that 100 versus 10 discrepancy. You'll see how this works in a second. So weight, cost, quantity is going to do it based on the number of units that you're ordering, or actually the number of units you're receiving. And then volume, like weight, is another value, another field that's stored in the inventory record for all of the items that you might be buying. Okay, so it's gonna take the total amount of the charge that's being applied and then apply it to all of the items that are being received on the purchase order and distribute it in an equitable way based on the relative costs, relative weights, relative quantity, whatever it is, right? So, and you set up an expense account or some kind of an account like a recovery account to say that any of the freight charges that I put in at landed, for landed cost are going to, well, so the net effect is going to be this, right? So you have a vendor that you're receiving from with an agreed upon purchase order price, let's say for $1, and you've got a 30% tariff, let's say, okay? It's going to add that kind of charge to the back end of the whole thing. So when you receive that purchase order, it's going to post $1.30, the sum of the dollar that you owe the vendor and the 30 cents for the tariff. It's going to post each unit to inventory with a value of $1.30. That's your debit to inventory. The credit would be to whatever account you decide is going to be up here, some kind of a recovery account typically. And for the so 30 cents would get posted to the expense account that shows here for one item received, and then the dollar gets posted to the suspense account, the purchases clearing account that you've set up for that item in the product line, right? Anybody have any questions about the GL side of this? We'll see it in a minute too when we do an example. All right, so we set up tariffs through landed cost maintenance. Now, we set up any kind of landed cost charge. So you could have ocean freight, you could have freight, truck freight to the door from the dock to the door. You could have duties and fees. You could have insurance. You could have, any charge that you want to. And again, the conversation to have with your accountant about how you want to go through and value these things. When you create, and this doesn't affect the purchase order entry side of things at all, really. Okay, so you go through and create purchase orders the way that we have up to this point. I'm just using test data in the system, so it's relatively limited. But I create a purchase order for a vendor. I go through and put line details in there, and I say how much I want each of these. How much I'm buying for each of these. I have my agreed upon price or cost from the vendor. All of that just works the way that it always has. There's really nothing affecting landed cost the way that Sage has built it until I start doing receiving. Okay, so when I go through and do receiving, then I'm in receipt of goods entry. And this is something that we tend to have to modify for people to make it work a little better. And I'll show you why, or you can imagine why. But if I create a batch here called LLB, and we're going to go ahead and just we'll do a receipt. Let's say I'm receiving that purchase order that I just showed you, T3. I'm not putting an invoice number in. I don't really need to. Go to the lines tab. Do you want to receive the complete PO? Sure. Okay, so everything here is the same as what you're used to. When I get to totals, though, with my landed cost switch turned on, I'll have this new button in receipt of goods for landed cost. And what I can do here is I can add my projected cost of each of these things that are on the order, depending on which ones apply to this particular shipment, right? So if freight applies, I can say that the freight from the dock to the door for this is going to be $100. And if the tariffs apply, and this is the sort of the interesting part. So if I put a tariff fee in here, this work. Hang on a second. Let me get rid of this one for a second and come back to it. I'm going to save this. If I go back here, if all of these items are coming, well, obviously all these items are coming from the same source. So in theory, the way the tariffs are being thrust at us right now, it's a straight percentage on all of the items that you're receiving from a given source, depending on where it's coming from, right? So what we have to do here then, let's say it's a 30% tariff, right? Where the hell is my calculator? Hang on a second. So what I would do is I would do 1176.16 times 30%, and that's my tariff amount that I would be expecting to pay on this, 352.85. Okay? So I'm going to put that in as my tariff. I'm going to do my freight again for $100. And then I'm going to do my tariff for 352.85. All right. And that's the effort. Now, what bothers people most of the time is that the people who are doing receipt of goods entry are probably the least likely people to know how to manage landed cost. We'll talk about that. But that's where landed cost goes. Landed cost gets put into receipt of goods entry. Now, when I run my receiving report, this is where the application of that landed cost happens. Okay, I'm going to pretend I'm in a different month here. So what it does is it's allocating those total charges. See, here are the total charges as entered. All right. And it allocates them I've said to allocate it based on cost. Now, if I'm charging a straight tariff, a 30% tariff across all of the items on an order at a straight rate, it'll apply it at 30%. Right? So if I do 352.85 is the total amount, if I do 465.24 times 30%, right? 139.57. And if I do the 710.92, right, which is the extension of the second line down here, that's the amount I'm due from that I owe the vendor. And I do the same times 30% down here. Whoops. Let's try to do it a little smarter than that. 710.92 times 0.3 to 1328. See? So it'll manage this the way that we need it managed to apply a straight percentage. And then if I go through and update this, and I'm going to show you an update based on one that I've done before. Here was a receipt of goods that I did yesterday in preparation for this, which is impressive since I rarely prepare. But so here are the various costs that were applied, right? Same kind of thing. I had a straight tariff at one point. This was just 30%. You can see quickly that this is 30%, right? 450 and then 90 bucks on the 300, right? Anyway, so it created the tariff there, and here I had both freight and tariff, and it was doing an application of all that. Total $100 here, 165. If you take a look at the daily transaction register that gets updated for that, then, oops, let me go back to here first. The total from the vendor was 26.25. Or excuse me, the total from the no. I have 1,800 here and 825 here. Anyway, here's the total that goes to purchases clearing for the items that I purchased. It's still the same vendor amount that I owe the vendor ultimately. And when I get the receipt of invoice, it's going to debit out this purchases clearing account and credit AP, right? That's how the whole thing works. It's a three-way match. But in the meantime, it's updated inventory for the entire value, including the application of all of the rest of this stuff, right? So inventory gets updated with the full 3430, which is the sum of all of these things, the amount that I owe the vendor plus, this is one of the tariff amounts, and this was the freight amount. This was the freight landed cost value that I wanted. This was another tariff amount. So all of this gets updated that way, and that's how it posts to your GL. Any questions? Don't be shy. Everybody has the same question. I can guarantee it. Okay. If not, then what we could do is we could look at inventory. We could look at item inquiry on one of these. So here is, let me go back to the other page. Okay. So here are these, test items in Sage. And if I take a look at item inquiry after I've posted that account, what you see is the item, there's a new column that's added to your cost detail. These happen to be FIFO items. The item cost that I purchased from the vendor is 55 bucks, but there was an allocated cost of 17,666. Let's find that somewhere. Maybe it was on a different one that I posted it. Anyway, it's going to match up to the, I'll find another one, pull another one up, but let me just pull this back up to show you what I'm looking at. So this allocated cost then represents the amount of landed cost that's applied to, that's added to the item cost to come up with a total unit cost. Okay. So this 72,666 is the sum of these two fields together. And that's what hits inventory. And when you sell this item or use this item in production, that's the cost that gets applied to that transaction. Does that make sense? So landed cost is the basis for this whole thing. And Anthony sent around a sort of a quick overview of landed cost. And we'll certainly share this link with everybody so that they can try these things on their own to see if what I'm saying is making sense to them. But landed cost is how Sage wants to do this. And then this, you can update those tariff rates. You can do whatever you want to. Now, we have done modifications for other clients using landed cost specifically around tariffs because they buy some items from a guy that's not I don't know how the mechanism works, but they buy some items from a guy and it is tariffed and some items that are not. Or they have some where they've negotiated with their vendor to get a rebate on tariffs to try to keep the cost reasonable. Or they have other fees, and they have all of these different fees that are based on a multiplication factor that gets applied. 25% for 25% for the originally started at 25% for the fees that they were buying for the items they were buying from China, less sometimes a rebate of 12.5%. And we set all those up as different types of landed costs and then set it up so that we did the math automatically so that the landed cost field that's in the purchase order that the users have to enter now was automatically set. So I'm going to stop for a second and pause. Does anybody have any questions about how this was? I'm going to turn my camera off too so we can talk. Does anybody have any questions about how this works and what this means to inventory or really any other questions that we can answer for you about? Laura, go ahead. Thank you.
You had mentioned that it's done under receipt of goods and not under receipt of invoice where we might think that it would occur. Why is this? And are there any other options?
So this is the reason for that really is this, is that Sage, when the landed cost value that gets applied to the purchase order cost ends up debiting inventory, okay? And Sage debits inventory when you do the receipt of goods. So inventory hits your GL as soon as you receive it, whether you've paid for it or not. The offset to that inventory posting is that purchases clearing account, which eventually, in theory, should wash out. And probably, if you use the system for a long time, that if there's any cost discrepancies that come in between the purchase order receipt and then the purchase order invoice, they're very tough to go back and try to reapply to Sage, right? You basically have to adjust out the tier that you just received and then adjust it back in at a different cost. It's a pain in the ass, but that's the way, that's the way Sage works. It does the same kind of thing because landed cost needs to be applied as part of the receipt of goods because it needs to be part of that debit to inventory. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but I don't.
Right.
But that's why these are typically projected costs because you're right. I mean, listen, you might not get that tariff bill you might get that quarterly. I don't know how it's going to work. You might not get that if you're doing freight, you might not get that freight bill before you get the bill from the vendor. So, there is no good way to match it up. The best thing you can do is put a projection in there, post it as some kind of a recovery against freight fees that you're paying, and, try to have visibility of it that way. I wish I could give you a better answer. Does anybody have any other questions? But you can see how this would affect inventory. You could see that this would go through and change the value of your inventory. And then you can just sort of follow that through and see how it's going to have an effect on any cost-based pricing that you're doing, which I guess is ultimately every kind of price. And also on the way it posts profitability for both the items and for customers and everything else going forward. This is going to obviously this updated inventory cost, which includes the landed cost now, is going to be your cost of goods if you just bought this item and sold it. Are there any other questions? Or does anybody need help setting up a test system so that we can, turn this on for you if it's, first of all, does this make sense? Is this answering the question of why you guys wanted to spend some time this morning with us? Does this give you a leg up to think about how you might want to try to manage things in-house?
Absolutely on my side. I mean, before this, I never knew kind of how to apply freight cost and then additionally the tariff. So it seems pretty straightforward, honestly, from my side. It's just kind of doing some mathematical calculations and then applying it across the invoices. I think the hardest part for us is just going to be
Yeah.
we typically receive like 10 to 15 invoices in a shipment. So doing all that math and applying that freight cost across those 10 to 15 invoices with, I don't know, 5 to 10 different items on each, that's kind of the hard part. But
Yeah. Now, just to speak to that, Jack, for a second, when you say 10 to 15 invoices, I think you're meaning 10 to 15 purchase orders, right? In a single shipment?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know that there's a mechanism in Sage now to receive multiple purchase orders on one shipment?
No, I did not know that.
There is. Would you like to see?
Sure.
Let's see how we can do that. Okay, let's do that. But they have to be all to the same vendor. And because just step back for a second. The way that Sage works, the way that landed cost works is it applies to a shipment. It's not applying to a single PO or anything like that. Okay, so all of the costs that are associated with a receipt of goods get applied only to those items that show as received on that shipment's receipt of goods. Does that make sense? Kind of, sort of. Okay. Is anybody else using the feature that allows you to receive multiple purchase orders? Anybody else know about it? Anybody want to see it besides Jack?
Sure, we'll take a look at it. I don't know.
Yeah,
that
we'll
we're
see
using it.
Hey, there we go. All right, let's see what we can do. So what I have to do is make sure I have a purchase order. So let me do this. All right, so here's my receipt of goods register. I'm going to close this for a second.
Screen again, Dan.
Oh, I apologize. Of course. Yes, I do. Thank you for the heads up. I am renowned for doing stuff like that. Let's do this again. Okay, so I'm back to looking at my screen and I'm looking at the receipt that I was just playing with. It's for United Furniture. So let me create another quick purchase order for United Purchase Order. I don't want to do this. I want to just get out of there and I want to get rid of this receipt of goods. So let's go into here. Let's delete my batch. All right, and we'll try this again. So let's go back to PO entry. Let's create one called T4. Let's give it a slightly different date. Doesn't really matter. Let's do it for the same United. Where the hell are those guys? Oh, there they are. It's not United Postal, I'm pretty sure. Let's see. United Furniture. That's who we used. Okay. And let's put some different items on here. Let's just pick a couple off the screen. Let's say I'm getting 3 of these oak desks. And I'm getting 5 of the maple. All right, so we'll keep it simple. So there's a purchase order set up for these guys. I have now, if I look at my purchase orders that are out here, T1, T2, T3. Okay, so 2 to United. So let's start a receipt for, I get a shipment coming in and it's a combination of both of these purchase orders. Okay, let's see how that works. So I go to receipt of goods entry. And I'm going to pull up my batch. And I'm going to start the receipt. And I'm going to say my receipt date. I'm going to change this to 20, but just move it ahead a little bit. So I'm going to say I have to start by receiving one of them. All right. And then with the option turned on, do you see this little plus sign that just lit up
Yep.
right here? I pick this next one. It looks out and sees all of the open POs for this guy. And I say, yeah, I want to do that one too. Okay, or any, it could be dozens of them, whatever. You can say you want to do them all. And if you click the receive complete, when I go to the lines tab, it will show all the items that are remaining on both of those purchase orders as received in full. Okay, but I'm going to leave this box blank for a second and show you how this works. So I say, okay. Then I go over to the line. I can do whatever else I need to on here. I'm not going to put an invoice number in again. Here are all of the items. Now, the interesting thing that's showing up out here there it is. See this PO number button? This PO number field is down here now too. So if I pull this up to here, okay. So what it's done is it's created a PO workspace for me here, receipt of goods workspace for me here with the two T3 items on it and the two T4 items on it. And now I can just receive any of these that I want to. So I can say I'm going to get 10 of those. And let's say I'm only getting 5 of those on this shipment, and I'm getting all 3 of those, and I'm getting none of these. Whatever. Okay? Same thing, though. I can still go to here, and I can still say I have landed cost for this. And because it's all coming from, the EU or from China or whatever, and because the tariff at this particular instant is 30%, whoops, I'm going to do the math again. 1010.94 times 0.3 is 303.28. So that's my tariff amount, 303.28. Okay. And what happens when I do this multi-PO receipt is it goes back and updates both of the purchase orders that were affected by this, as if I did them one at a time. So it updates them with the appropriate status, if it was shipped, whatever the back order quantities were, if it was received in full, all that kind of good stuff. Let's take a look. All right, so it allocates, here's the full amount of the tariff, and if I added up all of these tariff allocations, it would apply to that. You can see it's only showing 3 lines because the 4th line wasn't received at all. And it's going to do the math successfully across all those 3 lines to make sure that I'm getting 30% on each one. So if I do 465.24 times 0.3, 139.57. See, 139.57. Math is a miracle, really. So, does anybody have any questions about that? And we have this recorded for you so you can see how to do it. I think there's an option in PO options to turn on the multiple receipts. Is anybody remember that? I don't know that it just automatically turns on, but anyway, there might be an option to do that. But you just have to go through and start the receipt with one of the purchase orders and then use that plus sign to trigger the lookup window that shows you all of the open POs for a given vendor. And then I guess using the paperwork that comes with the shipment, comes with the container, comes with the whatever, whatever you get as an ASN, whatever you want to use, identify the different POs that are being received and just check them off so that those items flow to their